Aaron, you need to unmute.
All right, good morning. Let's try this again. Let's say happy Friday, everyone. But in the realtor world, Friday might be like a Tuesday or a Monday. Again, my name is Aaron Howe. I'm the chair of Professional Development Master Group, and I welcome you to our February Latte and Learn. This session is going to be focused on broadband updates, and we're fortunate to have from Albemarle County the Office of Accessibility and Affordability Director Michael Culp, and from Greene County, Dale Herring, at-large supervisor, to sit on our panel. We're also delighted to have CAAR Zone Neil Williamson, Public Affairs Director, to moderate this expert panel. But before we get started, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, Fulton Mortgage Company, for sponsoring this session. At this time, I'm going to introduce you to Cleve Brannick to share a few words.
Thanks, Aaron. Fulton Mortgage is delighted to sponsor this. I'm sure it'll be an informative and enjoyable session. I think a lot of you know who Fulton is, but for those of you who don't, Fulton Mortgage, we're a wholly owned subsidiary of Fulton Bank, founded in 1882 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, still headquartered there. We do business in 6 states, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, North Carolina, and Virginia. And when we lend money, we're lending Fulton Bank money. We're not brokers or correspondents. We're about $24 billion in assets. And in addition to the standard conventional FHA and VA, some of our niche products will do non-warrantable condos, 100% loan to value doctor loans, custom construction. But one of the products I'll touch on very briefly this morning that might be top of mind for a lot of buyers these days, interest rates, particularly where will they be 6, 8, 10, 12 months into the future if they're buying new construction and their home's not going to be delivered until, that time period. Fulton offers a free rate cap with a free float down, and we'll actually go out a full year on that. So a lot of customers have found that comforting because, as we all know, mortgage rates are up about 0.5% or so in the last 30 to 45 days. So that's Fulton's story. Again, we're delighted to sponsor, and I'm looking forward to the presentation. Back to you, Aaron.
All right, thank you, Cleve. At this time, I'm going to turn everything over to Neil Williamson. He's going to go for roughly 45 minutes or so, and then we're going to open this session open to questions. And if you have any questions, though, please put those in the chat now, or you can write them down and you can remember them later. But chat's a great place to kind of get them in order. But Neil, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, and everybody will be relieved that I'm not going to be speaking for 45 minutes. We have 2 experts on the panel that I've known for about probably over a dozen years, Mike Culp and Dale Herring. Both of them in different capacities have been engaged in the broadband conversation for almost that entire time. Really in the last 3 years, especially since COVID, we've recognized the import of broadband and universal broadband, and it really got an acceleration with the VATI grants, which I'll let these gentlemen speak of. As realtors, I'm being told that you guys are the first question asked. It used to be schools, and now it's broadband, cell phone, and schools. How is it going? Where is it going to be? How fast is it going to be? And I've been told by realtors that people bring their laptops out to check prior to writing a contract. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, who really has watched a little differently how broadband has moved forward. Albemarle has the Albemarle Broadband Authority, referred to as ABBA, also known as Dancing Queen. But the ABBA is the organization that really kind of makes things happen in Albemarle, and Greene has a different setup. Mike, if you can speak to that and about the Albemarle experience thus far.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Really appreciate the intro and being with you all this morning. So once again, happy Friday. I know it's a busy time for all the realtors out there and lots of activity. Appreciate everything you're doing to keep real estate at the forefront of how Albemarle moves forward in both the development and the rural areas. And broadband definitely has taken on a new role in the availability and accessibility of the nature of being connected and participating in the day-to-day activities of the world here. So it's very important that we pay a lot of attention to how well we put fiber in the ground, both in the rural and in the development areas. So with that, I'll just quickly go through some slides to give Dale some time. So good to see Dale again. We've known each other for a dozen years at least, and definitely known Neil for as long. So it's always good. So back in May, the County Board of Supervisors were able to find the funding as well as make an assessment of the need for broadband in Albemarle, so much so that we authorized the establishment of a dedicated office. Similar to the Economic Development Office, we felt it was important to put some dedicated people behind this. And fortunately, I was offered the role to direct the Broadband Accessibility and Affordability Office, moving over from information technology. So really good stuff. You know, we look at it from three tiers: the access, whether it's adequate or not, and whether it's affordable or not. A lot of work in all three. We definitely have a long-term goal of having competition as well as redundancy. So multiple providers throughout Albemarle County, that's going to be a longer-term goal. But right now we're working on making sure we've got accessibility, and I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. So if we could go to the next slide, Teresa, thank you. So we've done a lot of work. There's been frustration along the way. There's certainly a lot of things that went well. There's a lot of things that we're going back and trying to redo. Frankly, we're learning each time we go through and do this. You know, one of the things on the federal government side that everyone is concerned about is that up until now, somehow the FCC thought that 25.3 was an adequate service level. That is quickly moving to either 110 or 100, you know, especially if there's more than one person in the household that's trying to access a Zoom or a Teams meeting or those types of things online. And then lifelong learning requires that the same amount of bandwidth that is available to people who can afford it is available to people who cannot. So we're seeing a gradual decline in the amount of broadband available for students who need it to do high data rectification, you know, working with major data sets, doing things like virtual reality at home. There's just a lack of advantage when you think about the cost of going to those higher tiers. So I'll move on to the next thing and talk a little bit about the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, and that's called VODI. So we've been successful, Albemarle County has been successful in achieving awards through the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative since 2017. That first project was a DSL, digital subscriber line access project, just to get people up to 10 megs. So if you think back to 2017, people thought that 10 megs was the bomb. So, you know, now it's like you could hardly get by with it. So it just shows you how quickly things are moving. And I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to, you know, say it's amazing that Albemarle County went through and was successful in that way. So the next slide is what we're working on today, VODI 2021. And that is with Lumen. And I think if everyone here is pretty aware of what's going on with that company, we are in the process of going forward with some comments to the State Corporation Commission about their transfer of assets to Connect Holding, which has another private equity firm called Apollo. And the eventual company that will be running their assets is called Brightspeed. A lot more will come on that. That's not the purpose of this meeting, but I just wanted to assure everyone that we are working on that diligently, and we'll have testimony at the SEC hearing next week. So right now, though, we're trying to make sure this VODI 21, which is our biggest project to date, with 1,675 locations passed, will be successful. We're having monthly webinars for community members to participate, and then weekly updates with the Lumen team to make sure they continue to be on schedule. We hired a part-time person. Jason Inofuentes is a full-time person working with us mainly on affordability and some of the accessibility. But we also have a part-time person who's going around and doing site visits to make sure that Body 21 goes well. His name is Tommy Garland, and he's probably familiar with a number of people on this call. He's been in the county forever, grew up here, and is a valuable asset, and he'll be around. And then our biggest project ever is the next slide, and that's 22. And this is a combined project with 13 counties, including Albemarle. And there will be almost 5,400 locations in Albemarle County. And essentially what it does is it fulfills our goal of providing universal coverage, meaning every location within the county will have access to fiber at the end of this project. Now, it's a long project. That's what people are concerned about. You know, how will this be scheduled and put into place, you know, starting in spring of 22 and moving through spring of 25. Everyone wants to make sure that their part of this project is pushed toward the front of that. And we'll know more about it as things get going, but there's a lot of complication, and in the spring of 22, TJPDC and Firefly will have more information to share with the community. So just starting and working. Next slide. Future funding, there's a lot of activity on the federal level. We're watching that very closely. Treasury guidance for continued use of American Rescue Plan Act funds, and then the infrastructure bill. There's a lot of rules and regulations for that, but we feel we're going to have some other opportunities to take advantage of that funding and bring fiber to the development areas. There's one of the things, just to make everyone aware of, it's interesting how the body grants have been focused on the rural areas. At the same time, there are some development areas that are still DSL only. So they may have like 40 meg up and 2 meg down, but that 40 meg down and 2 meg up, that 2 meg up is a limiter. Because of the need to have multiple learning experiences or Teams meetings, those types of things. So we'll be looking at filling in those gaps where DSL in the development areas is the only option. That was a little complicated, but I hope you understand. We are looking at the development areas as potentially lagging behind the rural areas because there are some development areas that lack fiber today. So we're going to be looking at that as a adjunct, another project funding opportunity. Last but not least, I think, is the affordability side of what we're doing, just to keep everyone aware. So next slide, Teresa, if we can get there. Oh, there's 2 of these. There may be more. We are participating in what's called the Affordable Connectivity Program. It is a 30-month, $30 per month benefit that's through the federal government. So we're working with our Department of Social Services to make sure we're getting the word out. We also have a fledgling project that will be announced later, we anticipate, that helps offset that even more. We're also working directly with Comcast to help offset the costs through what is called their Internet Essentials Partnership Program. So that's a really good program that brings Comcast customers into a more affordable process, but it's not addressing all of our community members. So we're looking at other ways to get affordability in the forefront. So the future, just the next slide, and sometimes I like Jason to talk about this, but I'll take it this time, Jason. We're definitely working to expand the enrollment in the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program. We've estimated, and we're doing a lot more research on this, doing some mapping, working with the state mapping department to make sure that we're doing a very good job of assessing the 8,000 plus households and providing direct assistance to make sure that affordability is in their future and they can gain access to the higher speed layers of the internet. So we're working on that. This ACP bridge, the Affordable Connectivity Program bridge, is one of the ways that we're attempting to do it. Now, this still has to be approved, but we're working on making sure that this may be one of the options for bringing affordability to all. And I'm available for questions. That's all I had this morning. Thanks for giving me the time to talk with everyone. It's so nice to see everybody. And hopefully we'll have a good session after this. Back to you, Neil.
Great, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. And one of the things you learn working with local governments and governments in general is the acronym bingo. There certainly are acronym heavy for ABBA, DSL, VATI, MBPS, ACP, DSS, IEPP, BAAO is my new one. It's really important that all of these acronyms have import, but it's great to have Mike and Dale here to explain what they mean in real time to what we're trying to do in getting universal internet, broadband internet. If you say it's the beginning of 2025, that's, 36 months, 34, 36 months. And if you say the end, that's 46 months. I've been doing this a long time, and broadband has been a long time goal for all the localities. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dale to explain a little bit of a different route that Greene has gone. They don't have the Dancing Queen ABBA, but they do have the VATI grant, and they've got Firefly. And there are some other interesting folks that are talking about being involved in Greene. And Dale, if you could enlighten us, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir. First of all, thanks for having us here today. And I say us, beside me is Mr. Jim Friedel. He's our plan director. In a few moments, I'll share some slides concerning our portion of the grant. And it's very hard to follow Mike's presentation. It seems that whenever we're together in meetings, I'm always after Mike. So it's very hard to follow his presentation. So please bear with us as we go through the process. One thing that's important to note is that Greene started, if you will, behind the 8 ball compared to some other localities. We had a supervisor years ago that was very active and worked with the TJPDC to bring broadband to Greene County. Elections take place, the supervisor was no longer in office, and it kind of fell by the wayside. So when I was running for office 2015, that was one of my primary objectives. And at that time frame, I was criticized because government should not be involved in broadband. After being elected, we went through and made broadband initiative as part of our county comprehensive plan. So anything that came forward related to comprehensive plan, broadband was a question that was being asked, will it have broadband? It was also part of our BOS, the Board of Supervisors strategic initiatives. We created a broadband committee, and in our broadband committee, we made or have members from all parts of local government. We have a county administrator, the economic development team, a Board of Supervisor member, a plan director, the school superintendent, the mayor of Standardsville, a planning commission member, and emergency service director is also a part of that. And the goal was to make sure that as we went forward, there was no reason to slow up the process. We wanted government to get out of the way of broadband progress. We reached out to multiple providers. We reached out to CIT. We looked at development of public-private partnership. We looked at a dig once policy, looked at open trench policies. We talked to fiber contractors. And because of that, it brought us to where we are today. We were able to apply for multiple VATI grants. This is our 3rd application. This one was successful. The first 2 were not. And we changed the conversation in our locality. Before 2015, people did not want cell towers in their backyard. Once we started a conversation related to internet, broadband, cellular service, emergency service communication, we actually had a cell tower proposal, and only one person spoke against that cell tower. And that person spoke against it because of the right-of-way access and not because of the view. A lot of work was done to protect our view shed, and the conversation began to change. In 2019, when I ran for office again, it wasn't government should not be involved. It was, why aren't you doing more? And then it went through the process, people who have purchased homes were angry we were getting broadband. And so we changed the conversation in Greene to stress how important it was and what needed to take place. And that was the first part of the process for us. We then went out and applied for multiple grants. And I want to share a slide here and turn over to Jim here in a second. I'll go ahead and start sharing our slides. Let's see if I can share my screen. Excuse me for 1 second. And can everybody see my screen okay there? Yes, okay. So we applied for multiple grants. The first 2 grants were not successful. We reached out to DHCD to determine what was going on and why they weren't successful. We made improvements, and the last grant, we went through the TJPDC, working with CVEC. And so one thing that's important concerning our project is that in an August 24th meeting with the Board of Supervisors, CVEC anticipated a 2022 start. They didn't say necessarily in Greene County, they said all locations. But Greene is different than a lot of locations because in Greene County, in Madison and Louisa, the actual fiber routes will follow the path of the power lines. That requires a different skill set than the other locations. So they'll be working on the Greene, Louisa, and Madison at the same time concurrently. So we should start seeing progress or installation, if you will, run of fiber as early as summer or fall of 2022. That's not a guarantee, but that's what we're looking at there. The cost for 100 megabits is $49.99. The cost for gigabit service is $79.99 based upon the grant. And that is for unlimited data with no caps, which is an important concept. Now, we do have other providers in the area. The last vetted grant application, as a matter of fact, we have multiple providers that want to work with us. We do have, which was Interlink, that's being changed. We do have a company called Fiberlink that's in the area, and then moving to the east. And of course, we have Comcast. Those are probably our 3 primary providers. We do have Shintel that's providing beam technology now, and they are expanding service in the area as well. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Friedel, and he can go over some specifics concerning the RISE project.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to note that Dale had mentioned that Mr. Culp is so hard to follow that in the future we should drop the mic. Sorry. The project that we're looking at here is a multi-county project. Mr. Culp mentioned it. Albemarle is also benefiting from this project. It's perfect timing. Greene County had made themselves ready. DHCD actually told me that she had to find a way to get Greene County coverage because if she refused Greene and Madison again, she'd never be able to drive up Route 29 ever again. So between the pandemic highlighting the need and the importance of broadband, the federal funding, the availability of local funding, and CVEC being really the main driving force, CVEC Firefly, in getting the other power companies throughout these areas to team together, it gives us this great opportunity to get universal coverage. If you can. Yeah. So we'll zoom in on Greene County. The blue areas in this map that you're looking at are currently unserved or underserved. Most of these areas have dial-up speeds or less. Some of the areas we did a survey, they actually mailed the survey back because their internet speed wasn't reliable enough. I'd like to make a key point. Dale had mentioned it. The grant to start building the infrastructure in Greene and Madison is a little separate from the planning for the other counties because Greene and Madison, the areas that are being covered are mostly above ground. So it's a different contractor set than the ones competing for the majority of the rest of the work. Hopefully that's a good thing and means we'll be closer to 2022 than the end of 2025. The work should start, the contract will start in March. First customers will be online towards the end of 2022. And the one big note that I'd like to point out is, especially with the size of Greene County, but in the area that's not blue, you'll note some major thoroughfares. All those white lines are major thoroughfares. And the majority of those lines will actually also be crossed, not as part of the grant, but as part of the infrastructure in order to get to the blue areas. So a significant area of our areas that already have service will be covered or offered a secondary and probably in this case better service than they're able to get on the current DSL or other options within those unshaded areas. And then finally, just a quick follow-up. I highlighted a couple of major things. If you'll note the costs that are part of the grant. So when these come online, those are the costs for the service at the top. I think the second bullet point is exceptional, and this is throughout the grant area, including Albemarle. 2,500 feet of service extension is placed for free. That's about a half a mile from the trunk line, which Mr. Culp can tell you is very unusual and sometimes a barrier for some of the other options and opportunities that have come up in the past. Outside of that, like I said, we're hoping a lot of people will come online in 2022. A lot of the major significant work will probably occur during 2023, with most of the closeouts and final work being in 24. It's all supposed to be done by March 2025. And that's all I have.
Yeah, and one last thing to point out, in case you're interested in their progress, Firefly does have a website that actually shows where they are and where the connected services. And with that, Neil, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, Dale. If you could pull up that map again, the first map, your first slide.
Let's see if I can get that back there. Sorry about that.
The regional map or the county map?
The regional map.
Regional map, okay.
When I look at that regional map, there are areas that are neither blue or orange, at least in my color blindness. Can you explain what those areas are?
What you're looking at, for example, is the rise coverage and where CBEC already was located, if I remember correctly. Is that correct in this?
Actually, those are areas that aren't part of the grant application because they already meet the criteria of broadband based on the grant criteria. So in theory, the majority of people in those areas are already served with a minimal broadband. So the grant is only for areas that are unserved or underserved and don't meet the criteria for broadband.
Okay, and then to Mike, when I look at this map, which was in your presentation as well, that means there's this big portion in the middle of Albemarle, which is mostly Charlottesville, I would imagine, in the development area.
Yeah, there's a great point, Neil. I think this is important to have everyone recognize it. And it goes back to my point before with the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative. We were limited in the areas where 25.3 and above were available on DSL. So that's the first thing that you're seeing is some of the areas where DSL is according to the body specifics, is a, how should I say this? Jason, if you're online, maybe you can help me, but it's basically, it wasn't included. We couldn't put it in the grant. So we have to go back and address those areas. Then the other thing that you'll see is, we have Comcast, so the Comcast areas are not part of the universal coverage. However, I agree with the planning director. There will be a lot of pass-throughs that will offer that additional service. I'm going too far to answer the question, but yeah, these are the areas that weren't included in the grant, but will likely be served. I think that's probably that's probably the best way to answer your question.
Exactly. And the two things I'll add, and everybody here is involved in real estate. And so you know that whenever you're doing that, you don't just look at the local government's regulations or the state government's regulations or the federal government's, you got to look at them all. And so the layers of regulation and standards for eligibility for different funding sources, everybody gets to define how that's going to work for the money that they're going to give you. And that is where we end up, if you were able to zoom in on the Albemarle map, you'd actually see these little, we call them donut holes. You'd see these little circles where we're just missing a few houses here and there. And the reason that they're missing is because the eligibility criteria for the monies, and I keep saying monies for reasons, because this project involves 5 different funding sources, including money coming directly from Firefly. They have different eligibility requirements, but everybody needed to meet the most minimum of the eligibility requirements. So in areas where you had faster than 25 megabits down and 3 megabits up, you can't include them in the project. That doesn't mean that they won't be served ultimately by the project. We just can't include them in this project now.
Great.
It's not, I have to take a picture of the front of the
The,
bus.
I'm going to ask folks to mute if you're online. Jason, I have another question for you. I had the opportunity to be on the Albemarle Valley update earlier this month. And I was very interested in the level of specificity that you were dealing with neighbors and the rollout of, can you speak a little bit to that?
That you're talking in particular about the questions related to which houses were included and which houses weren't?
And the answers that you were getting from the provider on the same Zoom call.
Right. And so I'll go back to those layers of regulation that we have to follow. At various points in time, sometimes that ground shifts. With the VADI 2021 project, and Mike was there for it. I actually wasn't. After the announcement, the initial announcement was December of 2020. They had to rescope the project because the federal government had just issued a brand new granting program, and they'd actually given some of the addresses that were included in the original VADI grant to somebody else. And that meant that all of a sudden we weren't eligible to provide those houses. And you know, geography is not a perfect science sometimes. And when it comes to engineering how you're going to lay certain cables and how you're going to distribute a new resource, sometimes you end up with a situation where in the original plans, you thought you were going to get all of these houses. But then as you actually start looking at where the lines are going to go, how they're going to be mapped out, and you then have to start over because you lose 1/3 of the houses that were originally included, it becomes fuzzier. And that's something that we've been frustrated with, something that the residents that are involved in this project have been frustrated with. And you see that every single one of these monthly meetings that we're having that, you know, Mike and I host, along with staff from CenturyLink Lumen. And I wish that I could give every one of those residents an absolute, you are in, you are out. But even now we're sort of sitting at this point where lots of things keep changing, including interest from Lumen in working with us to expand the footprint of the project. And so now we're to the point where when we tell somebody, no, you're not included, we also tell them, but you could be in the future, so stay tuned. And that's not something that we wish that we were doing. We wish that we could just give everybody an absolute. But right now for the VADI project that is underway, the one with CenturyLink Lumen, that's where we're at. With the RISE project, you know, one of the things that we're hopeful for is that because it's so much more inclusive, it's going to be really easy to answer yes. And it's going to also be really easy to answer no, but with a much more hopeful tone.
Yeah, just to follow up briefly, Neil, on that, the areas that were pulled out are now part of RISE. So the federal funding was awarded to Civic Firefly. So in a sense, it's like it's, you know, just a different provider. And in some cases, people are happier with the outcome. So on a positive note, it may end up being better. We won't know until we get there. Yeah,
Mike, before I jump back to Dale, you were part of a conversation 2 meetings ago with the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors and CenturyLink/Lumen. Could you enlighten the group on, first off, who's on first? I've got CenturyLink, Lumen, all these names that are flying by, and I'm not exactly sure. CenturyLink does not have the best name right now in Albemarle County. Can you explain who is doing what, where?
sure, I'll try. It's a complicated discussion, but Lumen is the parent company of CenturyLink, and the assets are being converted over to a company, Connect Holding, who has another company called Apollo. We are looking at this as a transition to Brightspeed. So when we look at where the future lies for the CenturyLink copper assets, we think about that as being transitioned over to a new company called Brightspeed. And to address some of the customer service issues, there is a hearing with the State Corporation Commission next week where we've worked to put together our own testimony, and we will be providing that to the SEC. So that's something that's going on. The other part of this is that on January 12th, there was a Board of Supervisors meeting with representatives from CenturyLink Lumen. They were asked to provide written responses to all of the Board of Supervisors questions. We received those responses earlier this week, and we are going through them, and we will have a response probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So there's a lot of activity. Customer service is definitely one of the pillars of what we're responding to and how they will address all of those as part of this transition. So just wanted to briefly put that in there. Hopefully it answered the question.
It did. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
welcome.
Dale, you had mentioned Fiberlink, which I think is part of Orange County Broadband, and they bump right up against, I guess it's the northeast side of Greene County. And you had indicated they might have some interest in moving into Greene. Is that what I heard you say?
Actually, they are moving into Greene. So that project was created as part of the local government process years ago. And so we met with their provider as part of the initial body grant application process for 2022. And actually a proposal came for the Board of Supervisors. They wanted to reach out near Tom's Road, that area for a subdivision that's going to place, provide service there. And of course, the board approved that. And they are looking at applying and reaching out into more Greene County. In fact, they actually had a body grant application to cover a part of Greene County in that area. If I remember correctly, did they? They did not? Okay. They were looking at doing so.
Department of Commerce and.
Okay, different grant. But yes, they're moving into the northeastern part of Greene County. So they're coming from the orange border, north of 33, eastern side of 29.
And I think time will tell. It's much like Josh explained. They are receiving their funding from different funding sources, and it's going to all have to be settled out which funding source gets which houses. So they haven't established exactly how far they'll be able to offer services in the Greene, because a lot of those grant opportunities and decisions are still up in the air right now.
All right, Dale, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and stop sharing so that I can see all the faces. I do want to bring up one thing that wasn't on our agenda. We have a realtor on the call who has some information with regard to Charlottesville proper and Charlottesville schools. Emily, if you could unmute.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share, so at this week's school board meeting, actually, we voted to approve and fund a private fiber network that would connect all of the city schools and properties. And that should be online, hopefully by the start of next school year, so summer of 2023. And initially, it is going to be just for city school buildings, but has the potential for additional loops to come off of that private fiber network to serve some of the underserved communities in Charlottesville. I think we think often that Charlottesville, pretty, well-contained city, has connectivity for everyone, but that is not always the case. And we'll also, I think, more largely address some equity concerns with access to internet as well.
Well, thank you for that update. Dale, question for you. I know that Albemarle has beefed up some of their staffing focused on broadband. How many employees does Greene County have working exclusively on broadband these days?
None. And I say that, and I've got to be honest with you, basically, I am the Director of Technology for Greene County Public Schools, as well as the at-large supervisor. I've taken that role on as trying to be a champion, if you will, for broadband. Mr. Friedel, and this is why he is here. He is the plan director. He has taken on that role as a large part of his job. Like I said, though, we have made it part of our Board of Supervisor initiatives. It's part of our comprehensive plan. The county administrator is actively working on this goal as well. So we don't have any dedicated staff But everything that we do as a local government, whether schools or local government, even including emergency services and expanding their towers, the African Plan Commission, the Economic Development, broadband is always a topic of conversation, and how can we expand that with the resources we have, and what can we do with the developers that come online to make it easier for them to bring broadband to their residents. So we don't have a dedicated team, but we've got a lot of people dedicated who are dedicated to the task.
All right, first Mike, who runs the BAAO, my new acronym of the day. And then I'm going to ask the same question to you, Dale, which is the question all the realtors want to know. When are we going to know when we're going to get broadband?
That's a great question. I'll try to answer. It depends on which project area you're in. The CenturyLink Lumen project that's going on, we have the schedule. So, encourage people to visit www.albemarle.org/broadband and then look for Body 2021, and participate in the monthly webinars. We have webinars with Lumen representatives on there that are going through the schedule, and the tentative but pretty solid schedule for that has everyone finishing up by the end of 22. So those 800 locations will be served during the 2022 period. As far as the Body 2022 with Civic Firefly, we've yet to find the detailed schedules. So those will be coming out later. We're promised to have those sometime in the spring of 22. Bill's shaking his head over there, so we're saying the same thing. So we're working on that. So I think that answers the question. There is some Comcast activity going on in Charlottesville and Albemarle, and there's also a great new project going up in Crozet with Lumos fiber. So we're excited. There's a lot of activity going on. That's the positive side. So if it's Lumos or Lumen, which will become Brightspeed or Firefly, we're going to get to universal coverage by the end of 25, if not sooner. Thank you, Neil. I'll turn it over to Bill, see what he has to say.
Dale, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you the same question with regard to when will we know when we're going to get broadband at the various locations?
We should have some information later on this summer, and probably between July and August of 2022, based upon the last VATI grant award with CVEC and the RISE project. And that's what Mike was alluding to there. We are hopeful that ours will start earlier than other counties because of the nature of the contractors involved. At this point in time, we don't know exactly when the actual start will be. We have been told that once you see a truck or a fiber contractor in place, it's going to be 6 months after that before the first home is actually connected. So the RISE grant, we should have more information probably of August of 2022. And again, they do have a website listing that. As far as the other projects, we communicate regularly with like Fiberlink and other providers in the area, Chantel, with Beam Technology. So we pretty much know when they're coming online, and we can always make that information available as we find out. We do currently have a link on a website. It probably needs to be updated on a county website to provide information to people. It does need to be updated at this point in time. We can take care of that for sure. But yeah, probably August 2022, we'll have more information.
So just repeating what Dale and Mike said, within 6 months, you will have the schedule for when broadband is coming where, and that schedule should end, based on our conversation, at the worst case, the end of 2025. So while that doesn't mean we're there yet, we are a lot further along than we have been. I'm going to break out to question and answer now from the group, and I've got a number of questions in the chat. I'm going to put this one to Mike because I know I think he knows this answer. What do you all currently use or recommend to clients and residents as a resource to check current internet service providers and speeds available at a property?
Broadbandnow.com is the one way that you could do that. It's certainly a viable option. The best way to go through and find the area that you're looking at would be through the provider site themselves. CenturyLink Lumen has a way that you can look up an address just by typing it in, and it'll go back and show you where they're coming. Comcast has the same capability. So there's tools that allow you to do that. I think that's a good example of where Jason and I could probably put direct links to those, because when you do a search for them, sometimes they take you to a site that's not run by the company itself. So that's something we could do. That's a great idea to bring those into play.
So the Broadband Now would cover all of the providers?
Yes.
If we could get that link, that would be very helpful, Jason.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that, and Sarah, thank you for the question. One of the things that realtors look at when they're listing a property is, well, what's the broadband service and what's the speed? And that would be something that we could be the realtors seek to be the source of the source. And that provides the opportunity to give folks data that we don't, as realtors, don't come up with, but the source of the source is there. So I thank you for that. I've got other questions in the feed in here. Lots about, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Neil, just one more thing. You know, one of our partners in all of this is the Department of Housing and Community Development's broadband office with the state. And one of the projects that they have rolling, and it is something that Ms. Holmes or Dr. Holmes at DHCD has been kind of carrying around a big stick and a very small carrot on, is trying to get providers to actually give that very specific coverage area, because sometimes you look at their maps, you look at somebody else's map, and it's unclear whether they actually serve you or not. The FCC's maps have not been reliable, but DHCD is getting ready this spring to release what will be a publicly available map that is going to give you much more reliable coverage information. So it'll actually give you some idea of, when you look at an area down to the census block, how likely is this provider or that provider going to be covering that area. You still want to go back to those providers individually to double check a specific address. But that is a tool that we're hopeful is going to roll out this spring, is going to be really helpful. And DHCD really wants this to be a tool that the public uses.
And Jason, if you could send us that link when it comes live.
Yeah.
As an association, CAAR will include it in our news group, our weekly news group that goes out to all the realtors, because that would be a very helpful tool for realtors. Mm-hmm. And other questions are coming in, Mike, and believe it or not, a number of them, as you probably can see, are about CenturyLink service. I'm not certain that that's going to get resolved here, but I know you're going to be having testimony coming forward. Dale, how does the emergency services communication and broadband interlink?
Basically, our first responders need broadband access. And so, believe it or not, when you install towers, and I think it was called AT&T, I think it was called FirstNet, if I remember correctly, it's been years ago. But our emergency service first providers need to have broadband access for their utilities, their resources. And so when you install a tower, which we're going through a process right now to improve your communications, the first thing you have to look at is, can we provide internet access to our first responders? How do we do that? And if we can provide internet access to our first responders, can that tower be utilized without preventing problems with the communication to emergency services? Can we expand that service to our citizens? And so we were looking at the tower project, or the radio project we're currently involved in. One of the things we were investigating is, can we expand the service of internet service to our citizens as part of this project? And so that's how it comes into play. So our first responders do need broadband access of some type to their vehicles.
Understood. I think that's an underappreciated requirement for first responders. And the topography of Western Albemarle and the western part of Greene County creates line of sight challenges that require the towers that you have to make that happen. I want to make certain that I give everybody an opportunity. If you have a question, and you haven't put it in the chat, please do. We're going to be breaking here in about 5 minutes for a close, but I wanted to make sure I gave everyone an opportunity since I've been talking too much. I don't see furious typing. I will say that the reality of broadband and how it impacts our lives has only become greater over the last 36 months. As I look on the screen here, I see folks that I know have broadband challenges in their current locations, though they manage through workarounds and hotspots and the like. I also know that Mike and Dale have been pushing this boulder somewhat uphill for a dozen years, and it is now looking like very positively that we're going to move it forward. For instance, one of the folks just put into the chat that we get 3 megabytes on Frays Mill Road. I promised Mr. Friedel that I wouldn't ask when is broadband coming to Fredericksburg Road, but I know that it's coming and it'll be there by the early part of 2023, I hear, right, Dale? But in general, I think that I want to thank our panelists for being here and turn this back over to Aaron for a close.
Okay, Aaron had to pop off. So thank you, Dale, Mike, Jason, Bill, thank you for being here today and enlightening us on what's coming with the broadband. And I'm sure we'll have more questions. Dale, if you could send me your slides, I'd love to be able to get all of these slides that we've received out to those that have attended today. So that's all the time we have for the questions. Cleve, thank you again for being our sponsor and joining us. We appreciate all of you sharing your expertise, and I hope everyone has a great day. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.